Hello, hello, hello. This is Uncle Tickles. You are listening to the TMC podcast. Today, we are joined by co-founder Penny Jane, Band-Aid to the stars, and a pretty big heavy hitter in the movie industry. Our friend Stuart Pollock joining us all the way from Canada. Welcome, Stuart. Introduce yourselves to all of Uncle Tickles' little babies.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for adding me to this. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I am in Canada, where we've been under lockdown for, it seems like, 14 months. So that has not been fun, but spent a large percentage of my career in the movie theater business, and was lucky enough to work in the movie theater business when this movie came out, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Now I have the luxury and benefit of being a licensing agent, so working with a lot of cool movies and talent to get to see their product come out before it comes out to the average consumer. So I've been very fortunate in that way.
And that's really cool. Another really cool thing, and I want to keep beating this dead horse, in case you didn't catch the episode last week with Sean, our guests are the ones that are picking the movies that you will then choose from in our polls, which tomorrow, Tuesday, depending on when you're watching this, May 4th, we'll have a new set of movies that everyone can vote on. Stuart, you picked the four movies. Tell us a little bit about why you picked Almost Famous.
Almost Famous is one of my favorite movies of all time. I was fortunate enough to see it at its world premiere, but love Cameron Crowe, loved the cast, and loved everything about this movie from the first time I saw it. And I think it's its 20th year anniversary. I must have seen it over 50 times. So I've watched it multiple times.
Yeah, very kind of fortuitous that it's celebrated or just celebrated an anniversary. The movie itself, it kind of profiles William Miller, who's a young music journalist, and he gets to tour with the band Stillwater at a very young age, and kind of the pitfalls that come with the rock and roll lifestyle. And you can imagine being a 15-year-old exposed to that. The movie itself scored 7.9 stars out of 10 on IMDb and a 92% audience score. So it's a pretty well-loved movie. But Stuart, I know in the notes you had mentioned it wasn't necessarily a box office smash, right?
Yeah, it's funny when you see a movie early on before it comes out, you have a different opinion of it. I got to see a lot of movies in screening rooms with either myself and one other person. And, there was one time we're like, oh, we can't sit through this movie. It's so boring. We didn't know that Forrest Gump would be that popular.
And who were you? It was a pretty big name that you were sitting with through the screening, right?
Yeah, and I've had a few. For Forrest Gump, it's one of our film bookers that we were sitting with. But you don't know in that audience. But when I saw Almost Famous, it was like, this is going to be humongous, great talent, great cast, and to see that it only grossed $32 million is a major fail. And all these years later that people love this movie, it just shows that, it didn't work out. And there's lots of movies like that where they come out and they're either up against other movies that have a bigger audience, or it gets lost on the first weekend. It's almost impossible to come back from a box office. And
The Big Lebowski comes to mind as a movie. The Big Lebowski, yeah.
And I've been listening to the Entourage podcast, and that movie was horribly received as well. But this show has always been well received. But sure. You never know from a box office perspective. But sometimes it hits afterwards. One of the movies that I loved as well is Mallrats, and Mallrats was a complete dud at the box office. But Kevin's movie has lived on and on and on afterwards, and we have one of Jason Lee's in both of the movies. So,
I love this movie. It's a movie I watched when it came out. I was right about 18 or 19 years old at that time. So, in an impressionable age, in an age where I'm exploring music really heavily for the first time. And also, very much relating to William Miller's character. So it really took me by surprise when I learned that the character William Miller and this movie largely in general is based off of Cameron Crowe's actual life. And this may be something that's common knowledge to some listeners, but if you are not familiar, this is pretty remarkable. Cameron Crowe graduated high school at 15. His mother was very much like the character you see in this movie, Frances McDormand. Very progressive, very non-conventional. And it's in high school that Cameron Crowe starts writing for the San Diego Door. He actually meets the character that Philip Seymour Hoffman is based. That's a real life person, Lester Bangs, who then went on to be the editor at Cream. He actually does give the real life Cameron Crowe an assignment to write on Black Sabbath, and that assignment turns into a job with Rolling Stone. His first cover is with the Allman Brothers. In that that experience with the Allman Brothers, this movie is based on his experience with a lot of different bands. Like he famously almost died with the Who in a plane, so that scene is there. But it seems like there's a lot that is centered and moored upon the experience he had with the Allman Brothers, and he did that in a time when that band was going through a very tumultuous period in their history. Dwayne Allman had just died, another member had passed away, and Greg Allman was very suspicious of young Cameron Crowe, and he actually did call him a narc, throughout their time together. There's even a point where Greg Allman steals Cameron Crowe's tapes. So he didn't necessarily have the moment like you see in the end of the film where they challenge the truthfulness, but there is this crazy scene where Greg Allman just steals all of the tapes with all of the interviews, and it took like a record executive going and having to get them back from Greg Allman. And there's this really touching story. Actually, I'll just touch on it now. Cameron Crowe talked about, much later, close to the end of Greg Allman's life, seeing Greg Allman in concert, and Greg Allman, was very frail and died shortly after. But he said, "Thank you for Almost Famous." So you have this impact. I also think, even though this doesn't necessarily connect to the movie Almost Famous, it is part of Cameron Crowe's life. So he goes on to write for Rolling Stone, for a number of years. And there's this really interesting interview he does where he talks about being washed up at 22 years old, or this feeling of being washed up at 22 years old, and how weird that is because he's lived such an accelerated life. He's done so much, graduated at 15, working for Rolling Stone. At 22, you were already there for 7 years. Like, that's insane to think about.
Yeah.
And he comes up with the idea to go undercover in high school and write an expose about what it would be, or what it's like to be a high schooler at that time. And that turns into Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Then goes on to direct Say Anything. There's Jerry Maguire. And then afterwards, I know this film was kind of panned as well, but Vanilla Sky is a film I actually really, really love. We Bought a Zoo. I think his last film was Aloha. He's got some music docs in there too, but yeah, so that's his filmography. I just found it fascinating, and clearly the guy has a love for music that's reflected in the film. You guys, anything in the research that you guys did that I missed, just kind of connecting the dots between the parallels in their lives?
No, I think it was one of those ones when you're watching the movie to find out afterwards that was semi-autobiographical.
Yeah.
That was kind of a surprise to me because you're watching the movie. My favorite thing about watching movies is learning nothing about it beforehand and going in with a blank canvas. So I didn't know any of that before we walked in, and then finding that after, it made me like it even more, but I loved it already.
For sure. There's one other scene that I heard Cameron Crowe talking about, and I found it too crazy to actually believe that it was based on reality. But it was this, so after Greg Allman steals his tapes, he has this very dejected, he feels he doesn't know what to do. He's a 15-year-old, a grown man has just taken something from him. It's essentially everything that he has worked for. It's everything. And he's sitting in the lobby of this hotel, and who walks through? His sister, who was an actual flight attendant. That actually happened. That, because in the movie, after, he doesn't get the interview, he's dejected. His sister takes him home. That's a scene that actually happened in real life. Just like you think of the circumstance for that to have had to happen, these two, those two stars to align to make it happen. It was just really remarkable. So with some of that out of the way, let's get to our favorite scenes. And Stuart, I'll let you start on this.
One of the classic scenes in this movie is when they meet up when they were in Midwestern United States, and they made up with the kids. It's like, do you want to come to our house? We're just some normal guys. And, to read about it afterwards, that it was actually based on something else. And I talked about Entourage before. Entourage kind of ripped that scene off as well. When they were waiting to find out how Aquaman was going to do, and he was despondent there. And this is kind of, they had a fight with the band. So that one was one of the cool ones to show, like, although you think these people are big stars, they're kind of, they have their insecurities, they have their fights, and sometimes they just want to go where people love them, right? And that group really loved them. It was a really cool scene, I thought.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Billy Crudup's performance in this is great. Maybe someone's going to touch on that later. He's not on my list, but, another thing that I thought was remarkable about the movie was learning about how serious all of the actors involved took it. So the members of Stillwater, they actually practice, 5 to 6 hours a day to be a real band. Billy Crudup learned guitar from Peter Frampton. It's these sort of things that are just amazing. And you know what? That speaks to Cameron Crowe. I don't know that there's another director who can kind of do those sort of things, right? Because he has that background. And they talked about, or I say they, I watched a lot of interviews with Cameron Crowe. If you were a fan of this movie, there is so much content out there, with Cameron talking about it, because it's so based on his real life. You can find a lot. And since there was a 20th anniversary that just celebrated, there is a really great, I'll suggest that. You can find that on YouTube. It's an interview with Cameron Crowe and Kate Hudson and Patrick Fugit, who plays the older version of William, Billy Crudup, and I'm trying to think if anyone else is in there. But I know they're all in it. And so it's an interview, and then it's hosted by someone at Rolling Stone, and then a podcast host who I'm forgetting the name of. But anyway, just there's a lot of great inside information, that you can find outside of this podcast there, and you can hear it from the lips of babes. So, I thought those are really great scenes. Those are good picks. Well, what about you, Kate?
Well, okay. So when this first came out, I was like 12 or 13. Right. So, I mean, it was like, Kate Hudson's a god. It was I swear to God. And I think I should have been a child of the 70s. I love everything about it. I even didn't purposely fully straighten these because they wouldn't have done that in the 70s. Or maybe they would have. My grandma used to iron my dad's hair. Well, okay, hold on. So I'm getting ahead of everything. So what I loved the use of payphones. I loved all of, I have maybe this is a theme. I love all of the vintage clothing. It just felt very much of it was very in tune with the way that I felt, it's oh my God, they're having fun and they're enjoying music and they're going out. And so being that age, it was oh, cool. These are things I have to look forward to, and then knowing the age of, what's it called? Cameron Crowe, during all of that. And then you're oh my God, that was right around the age that I was during that. And
right.
Tommy, my mom would have never let me do that. Oh. But then even more so, the fact that my dad was in a band in the 70s called the Aaron Rush Band. The only thing that I have asked for him upon his, hopefully a long time from now passing, is his shoes that he used to wear, his platform silver shoes that he used to wear. My dad used to play in strip clubs in Milwaukee. I mean, he literally was if this band, didn't make it or had smaller fan base. So I love that part. And I have his 8-track. And so it's cool to see, how it can kind of bridge the generations in that way too.
For sure. So outside of that, did you have a scene from the movie that really resonated or that you found yourself, just appreciating more than the last time you remember watching it?
I mean, well, it's different now, right? Because I'm a mom. And so
for sure,
viewing it like that, I'm oh my God, it actually resonated me with some of the different, the trust that you have to place in your kids and the things that you have to kind of let go of the control so that they can have the experience. I mean, I think a lot of the scenes with the mom, I was I get that now. I get that totally different than I did when I watched it when I wanted to be, Penny Lane. So
right. No, I'm glad you brought that up because I had a similar experience rewatching, this go around, now being a dad of 2. I'm not sure if I've watched it since becoming a dad. And yet my biggest takeaways were my favorite scenes were the ones with Frances McDormand. I love her performance in this. So that's a little bit of a spoiler, especially that basically the movie from the opening to his last, to when he shows up to the Black Sabbath concert. I think that whole sequence is just so beautifully done. It sets the tone for the family. I think actually that it also sets the tone for why we see her as a mother so willing to let go, because she's already pushed one child away, maybe perhaps. And this is my take on it.
And you always fuck the first kid up unintentionally.
For sure. And she sees that and she's like, I have this one left, right? Like I have, this is my golden child, and there's even the scene in the car when he finds out his age, another one of my favorite scenes, 11. I just thought that, it's just the performance between, her and I guess she was kind of, I don't even really remember her part when I, when I was sitting down and planning to rewatch this and I'm making my notes didn't involve Frances McDormand. I was, prepared to talk about music, prepared to talk about Kate Hudson, even prepared to talk about, Cameron Crowe, but I was totally floored by her performance. So yeah. I mean, I think it sets it up, for why she does and acts the way she is. A total payoff. And here's another, funny story I heard Cameron Crowe mentioned in one of his interviews was he tried so hard to keep his mother and Frances McDormand separate during the filming of this movie, because there'd be times when his mother would be on set. And there was an instance where he essentially had this like momentary lapse. And he kind of explains it like you turn your back. I think as parents we can relate to this, right? You turn your back on your kid for 1 second, and then when you turn around, they're in the most dangerous, precarious situation that they could be in. And your back was only turned for a second. He turns his back for a second, turns around, and his mother and Frances McDormand are having lunch. There was like a really so I thought that was funny. And yet, so that opening sequence, it sets a tone for how he falls in love with music, why he has the relationship with music that he has, the relationship that he has with his mother, which is so unique. And then it also, this Lester Bangs guy, we get introduced to Philip Seymour Hoffman, who again he's not in the movie a lot, but when he's in it, he's just a force, just such a powerful force. So any scene with him in it, I'm just, especially that opening scene where he's talking about the Guess Who and Jim Morrison and, it's just, I love it all. And I think there's some really cool stuff. Oh yeah. And in that scene, I also want to just point this out because I thought this was another one of my favorite stories from like my research. Cameron Crowe, from everything I've gathered, is just a beloved director. Like all the different actresses and actors that work with him love him because he seems to approach each one the way they need to be approached. Right. So if someone needs, tough love, he gives them that. If some, in this case, and think about it, he's working with a young actor like, playing William, and then all the way up to someone like Philip Seymour Hoffman. And so, that's a pretty big spectrum on the acting grid. And so there's a scene, he says constantly throughout the filming of everything, he's playing music, and that's what's working. It's setting the tone. So Philip Seymour Hoffman, he's not in the movie a lot. And the portion of filming he's there for is also very small. So he comes in and, they're filming this first scene where he's in the radio. He's doing the Iggy Pop stuff and the Guess Who and the Doors. And Cameron Crowe starts playing Iggy Pop. And I guess there's a moment where Philip Seymour Hoffman freezes and he just kind of puts his hands up and he's just kind of like, and nobody knows what's going to happen. And he just starts screaming cut. And Cameron Crowe is like, I'm supposed to say that. Like, this is not going to be bad. This is not going to be good. And Philip Seymour Hoffman says, what makes you think that the music you're playing is better than the music I have up here? And Cameron Crowe goes, you're right. Whoever played that music is fired. No more music. We won't do anything. And it's just those sort of stories you hear. I love them, and it makes me appreciate the scenes when I go back and rewatch them. Because originally I'm thinking he's kind of doing his best like Jack Black impression. That's what it reminds me of watching him do it. But yeah, it's just so that whole that whole sequence and you know, kind of beating a dead horse again, but Frances McDormand, and then yeah, Stuart, that scene, I think from the t-shirt fight, all the way through that party scene, right? I think that's that's a great sequence. Just really, really great. And I also think that's really like, you know, those two sequences touch on the major, what I think is the major theme of the film, which is this idea of authentic versus cool. Right. And you get hit with that right off the bat, right? Because, you know, in you know, the opening scene that I'm talking about, his sister, as she's leaving, says, "You'll be cool someday." You know, and then, you know, when Lester Bangs is sitting down at the coffee shop and he's going through his mad ravings, he's referring to it as the industry of cool, like a bad thing, you know, like these rock guys, you can't be their friends, you know, like they just want to turn it into an industry of cool. And what he's talking about is authenticity. And, you know, you have that in the first 10, 15 minutes of the film. And then in this later scene, again, what is it about? What does Russell say he wants? He wants to just be with something real, you know, with real people. You know, we're talking authenticity, you know. Yeah. And then his words, his final words, you know, "I'm on drugs," you know, very unauthentic, you know, kind of, if you want to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
One little piece from that, the t-shirt that Philip Seymour Hoffman is wearing is a Guess t-shirt, which is originally one of Cameron's t-shirts that he lent him for it.
Oh.
And the other thing I found is that Philip Seymour Hoffman was sick the whole time. He was only on set for 4 days, had the flu the whole time. So when he looks a little out of it, he really was a little out of it. One of the things that I found doing some research on it that I didn't know until today is we love this movie, and you know, when you see a movie and you know it, the two main characters are always like they had to be from day one. Well, the original people that were supposed to play the two characters were Brad Pitt as Russell Hammond and Sarah Polley as Penny Lane.
How different is that movie, right?
Wow, totally different.
Yeah.
See, I'm glad it didn't pan out that way. I think it would have been a totally different movie.
It said that Brad Pitt just couldn't capture the essence. Like, he wasn't that guy, right? And it's funny that Russell was the kind of main lead for it, but he wasn't the lead singer, which went back and forth with it. And the funny thing is the lead singer, Jason Lee, is really a skateboarder. Right. Like that's where he came from. So yeah, so it's funny. And they went through a bunch of people who they originally looked at to be Penny Lane. So Brittany Murphy, Mina Severa, and HIS. Wow, that would have been different.
Yeah.
Neve Campbell, Jenna Elfman, Bridget Moynihan, Maggie Gyllenhaal. Wouldn't see that at all. But again, that's the one thing I found about when you get to see movies early on before you read a review or see anything, that you never really know in terms of, you know, how it's going to work and how it's going to play. And that's, I think, one of the joys of film, is just kind of going in with a blank mind and like, wow, what's in front of me now? And sometimes you get surprised, as I said, with Forrest Gump, and other ones we'd walk away and thinking, best movie in the history of the world, and it did nothing. So.
And Stuart, did you mention when you're going through some of those casting what ifs, Kate Hudson's original casting?
Yeah, Kate Hudson was supposed to be the sister.
Right. And Zoe Deschanel was going to be.
Whoa.
Yeah, she was originally cast as William's sister.
Yeah.
And Zoe wasn't in that piece. They had somebody else who was going to play Penny Lane. But yeah, Rebecca Romaine and Rose McGowan are two of the other ones. So just knowing, and you know, Kate Hudson was just kind of perfect for that role. And it's, you know, imagine, sometimes you get to see auditions afterwards, probably a little bit more prevalent now, where they'll show like auditions of people who are on the show. But that one we didn't see. But I really, after all these years, couldn't imagine anybody else playing those two roles. And Billy Crudup was, you know, somebody you didn't really know. He did the story of the Nike chairman who started Nike.
Oh
yeah.
No. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, Prefontaine. You're right.
Yeah.
So he hasn't really done a ton of stuff, but he was just so perfect for that role. So
he was, I actually thought, I mean, again, this is kind of like revisionist history or the Mandela effect, but I had remembered almost a completely different actor as playing that role. You know, when I was going back and rewatching, I'm like, oh, okay, that Billy Crudup. Okay. does anyone have Penny Lane or Kate Hudson in their strongest performances?
I mean, I just think it's so close to who she really is as a person. Like, I think out of anyone who had to like act for it, like she didn't have, I feel like she probably is most natural. I mean, her mom was Goldie Hawn, right? So
Right.
like she was kind of in that space. Like she, you know, had stars that she knew she was going to like in situations with famous people, you know? So, I mean, I
Well,
think that.
she was also married to Chris Robinson from the
Right,
Black Crowes.
exactly. So
At
she lived that life too.
Yeah, so
and-
she kind of lived a little bit from there, but I just think it was one of those ones of having somebody who hadn't done a lot, so you really could buy into that role. You know, you're not, when you saw her on screen, it's like, yeah, that's, you know, I know who her mother is, but you're not saying, oh, I remember her in this movie, and it's, you know, you have that kind of miss. It just, she kind of fit from the first time she went on screen, I thought.
And I think she was only 19 at the time of filming this, which is also kind of crazy. Yeah, Cameron Crowe said I forgot how he phrased it exactly, but it was essentially, you know, the character Penny Lane was written as someone who lights up the room when they walk in, and that's essentially Kate Hudson. Stuart, you had a little bit of background on the character, like the historical basis of Penny Lane, correct?
Yeah, so Penny Lane was partially based on Geraldine Edwards, a student he met while posing undercover for the Fast Time Ridgemount High. And the other half of Penny Lane was based on B.B. Buell, who I'm going to pronounce wrong, notorious rock groupie, 1994 Playboy Playmate of the Year, and Liv Tyler's mother. So like, so yeah, so I, you know, kind of a combination of those two, but it was just one of those ones where you thought, played perfectly. One of the things as we're going through those, I thought it was interesting, again, watching it again for a long time afterwards. Some of the other people who are in the movie that are pretty big stars right now that kind of like flash through the movie in a heartbeat that you didn't really realize also. So I think that's one of the things from a director's perspective is casting the perfect people for the movie. And I think that's one of the things that they really did here, both from a music perspective, you know, picking the songs that they did, and there's a little story about that as well. And then the other people that were in the movie, but you know, you didn't know at that point, so they didn't stand out, but afterwards they definitely have stood out.
Yeah, and gosh, I'm trying to look it up as we're doing this, but there's a photographer that a lot of his photos are, you know, essentially they come back up in the movie. The shot of Penny Lane dancing in the empty Cleveland. I mean, that's a picture. It's a famous still that this photographer did. Jay Baruchel's character, who, you know, you're kind of alluding to some different actors that kind of flash through. I just see we have and I know he was on your list, Stuart, Dwight, Rainn Wilson, right? He just came up. But the Justin or there's another picture of a famous Led Zeppelin fan, and he's got the T-shirt. Oh no, I take it back. I'm sorry. The picture is of a Rolling Stones fan. In the movie, Jay Baruchel is a Led Zeppelin fan. But again, based on one of these photographs, something Bernstein, I want to say is his name. I'll confirm that a little bit later. But did you have a couple other of the names that kind of run through or pop up in this movie?
Yeah, Anna Paquin.
Yeah, I was gonna say her. I was like, oh my god, because she was someone that I didn't know at the time, and then after, you know, obviously watching.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've watched Flack, which I thought was really cool, but they don't look anything alike anymore. Rainn Wilson, who you talked about, Jay Baruchel, Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family was another one who was there for a quick second, and obviously Jimmy Fallon. I think I remember because he was pretty famous from Saturday Night Live at that point, but you know, it's kind of they're not Easter eggs in the movie, but they're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that person. Like it was a pretty cool happenstance. And the other one that they talked about from a movie perspective, these guys spent $3.5 million on the music for the movie because they weren't pulling unknown music, you know,
the typical budget though is just like a little over $1 million, right?
In a big movie.
In a big movie. So I mean, it's like 3 times that budget.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I know we didn't have this in the notes, but I'm gonna put you guys on the spot. I can think of maybe 2 movies that I would put up there as far as movie soundtracks. Is this the best movie soundtrack? And I'll give you guys time to think. The 2 movies I put up against this, you talked about one of the movies already, Forrest Gump. So Forrest Gump's, you know, that was like if you were a 7th grader at St. Mary's, you had Green Day Dookie.
I can verify this by someone who went there shortly.
Yeah, you had Green Day Dookie and you had the Forrest Gump soundtrack. So Forrest Gump is just one of those. It's a double discer. It's got all the hits, and then a little bit of a dark horse. Judgment Night, which was maybe not the most well received movie, but I promise you, if you do research of best movie soundtracks, Judgment Night, it's a lot of hip hop, but it comes up there, on a lot of top 10 lists. So now that you guys have had some time to think, you guys.
I'm gonna go first.
Yeah,
I usually have the
Penny
least to add because I have a horrible memory, so like recalling things. But I'm really just gonna go with Space Jam.
That's a really, really good one too. Yeah, that is really good. Gosh, that's really hard.
I had a firm belief working the business that kids' animated movies had to have a phenomenal soundtrack.
They do.
So I'm going to pick Shrek 1.
Okay,
that's good.
Yeah, see,
right.
I have a tendency to just not count the animated ones because they are really, really good.
Just wait till that's all your kids will watch, Tommy. Like you're just approaching where I've been staying these lists.
They're in it. They're in it. Trolls 2. I know you guys are just getting into Trolls. Yeah, Trolls 2 is really good as far as.
Sorry, Allison has an update to the song she's been listening to in the morning. So it starts with Crazy Train. And this is by Ozzy Osbourne. She prefers that over the Trolls version.
Good for her.
And then she'll put on, she's sticking with Daft Punk one more time as her second. They've really brought Old Town Road back again, which has been really fun. I know it's
I love that. Well, I'm not a huge fan of Old Town Road. His more recent video where he's giving Satan a lap dance, huge fan of Satan lap dances.
But even on top of that, where I think that I may have just earned some of the most, incredible parenting points is my son started watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air this week.
Yes.
And the fact that I could still sing the entire intro episode, oh my God.
Accomplished. See, your memory's not so bad.
No. With music, like I can sing entire songs that I can't tell you the name of. Perfect example. I just found out this past weekend that the song Call Me Al is called Call Me Al. I was singing Call Me Out my entire life. Like I love this song. I add it to my list. I'm like, and it's a different title than I've been thinking my whole life.
Who's Al and why are they calling him? They should be calling him out.
Call him out.
Yeah. All right. So,
what was Stuart's? Tell me. Shrek.
Shrek.
Yeah, Shrek was one. And when I worked on those movies as a licensing agent, and when Shrek 3 came out, we would have clips like the opening of the scene, and it shows how much music is an important part of it. But that original scene was Weezer, Island in the Sun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But when they came out, it was Counting Crows. It was a Counting Crows song that ended up going through. So we would have a video that would show, here's the movie with no kind of special effects and no music, a little bit of special effects and a little bit of music, and you can see how much the difference is. Like that scene on the bus where they're playing Tiny Dancer. Imagine that with a bad song, right? Like it just was the perfect song in the perfect place. So I think that's the genius that you get behind people who love music, is putting the right piece into it as well. From, because sometimes, and I've sat, this one I can't tell you who, but like I've sat in a room when they were picking out music and they're like, oh, that's too expensive. I can't afford that. Or that works or that doesn't work. But like it does really make a difference for a movie. So.
Yeah. Dancing Sean, who was our guest last week, says Tarantino has some good soundtracks. For sure, Pulp Fiction would be probably on my list as well.
But if you go back,
and Reservoir Dogs too.
If you go back in the day, the soundtrack was so important because it was such a huge revenue driver for the overall profitability of the film. And that was Spotify and Apple Music. It's important for the movie, but it's not the revenue generator that it was. That you could, they probably made a ton of money from the soundtrack from Almost Famous. So it probably works out that way. They didn't make it from the box office, but that's part of the business, the movie business, right? In terms of how much you're paying. And Cameron now probably, who's his ex-wife was the lead singer from Heart, right? So she probably had she probably had friends, and they talked about it I think I put it in the notes in terms of how they got some Led Zeppelin stuff is
Oh yeah.
they showed the Led Zeppelin guys in the movie, and they're like, okay, you can use it, because these guys don't want to just give their songs away and have it in a bad place.
Well, and I think earlier I kind of got distracted in my own head with some of the technical parts of this that I was trying to manage. But I was trying to get to the point that this. I don't think another director can make this movie because of the relationship he had with these musicians from his time at Rolling Stone. And one of the things that became very clear is a lot of these bands liked him because he was a young, authentic kid. He wasn't out to destroy
no agenda.
them.
Yeah.
Well, and here's a couple really cool tidbits too, just like from what I learned. In that, again, opening sequence, one of my favorite parts of the movie, those records that Patrick Fugit is thumbing through, those are actually Russell Crowe's actual records. So that's a real thing. The little tape recorder that he carries around, that's the one Russell Crowe or Cameron. I keep saying Russell.
Like, wait a second.
Sorry. Cameron Crowe. That's Cameron Crowe's his little recorder that he actually carried around and recorded with bands. And and he talks about how that was one of the things that disarmed kind of these bands is they saw him again not as the enemy, and that's something they talk a lot about. He's the enemy. He's gonna just write a teardown piece. He was just a 15-year-old kid. He was just trying to do the best that he could. So people liked him. Peter Frampton loved him. I think he wrote the bylines in one of Peter Frampton's albums. Yeah. And Peter Frampton then wrote all the music for Stillwater, a consultant on the film, kind of repaying the favor. So, I don't know that this movie can be made without him. And obviously Cameron Crowe's love for music is just, something that adds to the film, makes it what it is. With that being said, I think you could probably list Cameron Crowe as one of the strongest performances in this movie. But I won't make that argument. Kait, do you want to start with your favorite performance from the movie? Oh, your audio dropped.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I have to go with Kait Hudson.
Kait Hudson. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's another. I think one of the major scenes with her is the scene where her and William, and it's the how much beer, where he sold you to, I forget the name of the band, for a pack of beer and $50. Well, how much beer? Really cool story. When Cameron Crowe had just finished, his edit of this, he showed it to his idol, a directing idol. And, he explains the experiences. The people in the Fox studio are really nervous because this big time director is coming in, that he's going to view it. And then Cameron's watching it behind him and he's stoic for the whole movie. And then there's this, there's a scene where, Penny Lane drops how much beer, and he sees him, his shoulders start to go and he lets out this huge bellow of a laugh. And Cameron Crowe was so excited after that he called Kait Hudson and said, "You made him laugh. I can't believe it. You made him laugh." And the director's name is escaping me, so apologies for that. But Kait Hudson tells the story of when they filmed that scene. It was the last day of shooting in this location. They were being pushed out, and Cameron Crowe was being really hard on her, telling her she wasn't giving him what he wanted. And it was one of these things where she kept saying, like, she had a breakdown. The way she explains it, she just has this like breakdown on set. She's like, I can't give him any more. I don't know what he wants. I feel like what he wants, he has it already. And they have that kind of back and forth, and they do a couple more takes. And then Cameron's watching dailies later that night, and he comes back and he apologizes. He says, "You were right. We got it. And then, that was reaffirmed later when he has this, showing with his idol, his own directing idol. So I thought that was a really cool story. And, the kind of joke, Cameron jokes a lot about how the main reason that the shooting of this movie went over is because Kait Hudson has a tendency for improvising her lines. And he's kind of a stickler for like,
it's like you and me, Tommy.
Exactly. Yeah, right? It's that relationship. I'm your Cameron Crowe and you're my Kait Hudson. So yeah, I thought those were really cool stories when I was doing research and digging into this. Stuart, what do you got for her for strongest performance?
I love Jason Lee.
Yes.
He's kind of he's the lead singer who's not the main person in the band. Just knowing his background and the movies he came off of, like, he's just such a strong performer, and he really bought that he was a musician. Because back when I saw that movie the first time, I didn't really know who he was. I didn't see any of his other movies before, and just did a really cool job. Was on the scene on the plane, and just the way his back and forth. It's like, I'm the lead singer. You can't put me in the shadows in the background. Just thought it was totally believable. I thought he did a good job, and kind of an unexpected piece. You knew you were going to get that from the main people, but I always like to look at a secondary person and see how they performed in those cases. So
for sure. And you know what? That was one of my, when I rewatched this, that was one of my big things that I had kind of penciled in before even sitting down was I remember Jason Lee, whatever. He just kind of stood out and kind of stole the show to me. Again, I thought he was fantastic.
It's foreshadowing because he spent part of his career doing all the squeakquels, those animated movies, Alvin and Chipmunks.
Yeah.
First song in the movie is
Alvin and Chipmunks, right? Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, since you're talking about funny little connections, I found a funny little connection to our last episode. Our last episode was The Graduate, right? That movie features the music of Simon and Garfunkel. And what is the album that William's mom finds? Yeah, and we just mentioned Call Me Al in Zooey Deschanel's Coat. It's it's a movie about music. What's the very first piece of music we're introduced to? Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah. They're high. A nice little connection as we keep having these. Frances McDormand again. I found her performance just amazing, subtle, beautiful. I love that. I love the reoccurring thing. Like, she freaks me out, man. Everyone that has to speak with her on the phone. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Philip Seymour Hoffman. Again, it kind of talked about him and just my love for him as an actor. I think that's a pretty universal thing. I love the performance by young William. So not Patrick Fugit, but the child actor who plays young William. I think he, like, again, the kid who, it's that opening scene where, while his mom and his sister are fighting, he's kind of picking up the record and looking at it. She's like, to be fair, Mom, I think she said "thank you." Well, what's the difference? Well, the letter U. Yeah. I just, the 11 years old. I found that all just. I found his performance really, really great. Here's. I'll say this, and I wasn't sure because I didn't want to necessarily. I don't like bringing negativity to a stream, but I was thinking about it. I actually brought it up with my wife. I was like, I don't know if I should talk about it. And then I got a message from a friend, and we were talking about the movie, and it came up when he had a similar feeling. I found a little bit of the portrayal of not just women problematic, but also it was, I don't know that I remember that Penny Lane says she's 16, and I don't know if that's her real age, and I think there's supposed to be some ambiguity, like, how authentic is she being, and, with her, we can talk about this idea of, just really backtracking a second, talking about the character, the scene, she's constantly, we should go to Morocco. And then, William says, there is no Morocco. There never was a Morocco. Right. And then at the end, what happens? She goes to Morocco. That's her being authentic, or like true to herself. Right. We're talking about this idea of throughout the film of cool,
or just reclaiming it, from wherever she was before.
For sure. But I mean, if she is 16, I think it. Again, we're thinking back to.
Well, she does drive in the movie, so I think the assumption is she is 16.
Yeah,
at least.
Or
so
older.
Or older.
16 or older, but still somewhat problematic when you consider the age and what's going on with her and some of these older men.
You could almost do a whole show about movies that would never be made today.
Or shows, Saved by the Bell.
Well, no, but like there's a lot. The one we always bring to the first is if you ever saw the movie Blazing Saddles.
Oh,
could could never be made today.
One of your choices. I love that movie. But here's my argument against that, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. I just watched a gay rapper make a music video where he's giving Satan a lap dance. I think there's still crazy shit being made today. All right.
Yeah.
So I think there's an argument like for that and against it. I get both sides of it.
Well, it's not
totally
necessarily the politically correctness of it. It's getting the money from a studio to make it. Like that's kind of, if you want to take your phone and create a movie, then that stuff could be made, right? But if you want just recent and coming out of COVID and what's happening to the movie theater business, it'll be very interesting to see that. I know it's a different topic, but the business of the movie theater business, like when Almost Famous came out, it had a theatrical release, it had a DVD release. Remember those? And then it would have a cable release, and then a TV release, and then a streaming eventually. And now it's all one. Like there is no DVD release anymore. So the dollars are gone, and now there's not even a theatrical release. It's going straight to streaming.
We went to Target the other day, and my daughter was like, "Look at Soul's out on DVD," and I'm like, "Number one, you've seen it, and you know it's already out on streaming. Two, it's a Blu-ray. Like, let's at least like."
Yeah, can I get that on Laserdisc, please?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to keep harping on the scenes I found problematic, but again, one that just didn't stand out to me in my first maybe 100 watches of this movie, but this time the scene where William kisses her after she passes out on Quaaludes, like I was like, that's assault, brother. Like, I think I'm watching it as a dad now versus as just I don't know, or that's got to be, I think, the big change for me, or also maybe just be more mature. But there was just more problematic. I remembered it being less problematic than my viewing experience.
His mother let him go at 15 years old to go on the road. Like you would never let your kid do that at 15.
I think that is in large part because she kind of looked at she had lost a daughter because she held that daughter too tight. So again, we can talk about the psychology of that a little bit more, but I thought those were some of my strongest performances. And we're talking about kind of our mindsets when we watch this, originally to watching it now. And I alluded, I was, in college, I think, or high school when a senior in high school or freshman in college, somewhere right around there when I watched this movie for the first time. So very impressionable. Cameron Crowe says that it's still to this day a movie that new staff. So, today as someone will come on to the staff of Rolling Stone and they'll talk to their higher ups about, why they wanted to come work for Rolling Stone, they'll cite this movie, Almost Famous. So, it's still resonating with young people. Kait, was this something you watched, around that time? I think you had kind of mentioned, first seeing it too.
Yeah. And I mean, from there on, it was like, I wouldn't say it like inspired my travel bug, but it was like, it made me want to go out and like see other things. So like when my dad would be traveling, like I would go and I would explore cities in like a similar way. Or then like, I remember turning 18 and I was still in high school, but like I'd had jobs. So I booked a ticket to New York. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, you kind of, just you see what independence looks like. And, I think, I don't know, like I always liked it because it was like, you can do whatever you want. And then if you want to change it to be the more real version of yourself, like you can go do that and you can change course. Like just because you've been going one way doesn't mean you can't totally pivot and go another way. So I thought that was cool. And it's just different watching it now. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I liked it.
It is weird, like watching it originally relating to William and now watching it and relating to Frances McDormand and just being like, what happened? What a cool fucking mom, right?
I think it's how, I think that to say like as a parent then, right? Like, cause then it was like, when you're younger, you're like, you just want to grow up, you just want to grow up, you just want to grow up. But then you realize you really don't want to get above a certain age. Right? Like 23. That's great. It's right before all the responsibility hits. You have some, like clout and experiences in the world and whatever. But like, yeah, I mean, now it's like, okay, how do I figure out how to safely bring that back into my life?
Yeah. Well, and I think you kind of hit on one thing. You're like, it does kind of inspire me. Like, how do I foster this sense of
Like, I
independence?
can still be a mom, but a badass. But then I could also have my kids learn how to like live in the moment and appreciate the things that are like age appropriate, but then still look forward to the things that are like coming down the line.
Well, and I think that so much of her character is lost on us, like like how progressive she is, because like even just the fact of like I'm cooking soy patties, like cooking soy patties
That
in
was my
19,
mom.
you know, like, but that's like that shit didn't happen. Like it
No.
now it's so common. Like we have Beyond Burgers in our house. We're a meat eating house here, but we still have that sort of stuff, you know, like because it's become that sort of household commonplace. But in whatever year that I guess I should probably know that what year that this is supposed to be taken. Does anyone know that? Is this like 77, 76?
I was gonna guess 78.
Okay,
Yeah,
somewhere
in that time period.
Yeah, because he's the Philip Seymour Hoffman character is talking about the death rattle of rock and roll. So that's got to be like right before disco takes over, or at least in my mind. So yeah, I mean so progressive. I think that's one thing that can totally get watered down in rewatches now, because it's like I said, like that sort of progressiveness is more commonplace, in and of itself. 73, dancing. Look at him. He is the all-star. So the film's supposed to take place in 1973. Dancing Sean, you are killing it today. Thank you.
VIP.
Yeah, VIP for sure. Now this is the kind of the moment I've been waiting for. This is the question I want to know. Stuart, your first instance watching this movie, it's a very special, it was a very special viewing. Please tell us about this a little bit.
I was super fortunate. I had worked at a movie theater company called Famous Players at that point. And I got to see this movie at the world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. That was back when everybody was together. So sitting with cast around us, meeting everybody, and a big audience that loved Cameron Crowe. So like the reaction was phenomenal. Most of the cast was in the auditorium, just because they were, there was nobody in that cast that was, a huge star at that point. So they're all there. And then leaving the movie theater and going to the after party. And Toronto International Film Festival was known to have great parties back in the day. The studio spent a ton of money. And this one, we walked in with Alec Baldwin and with Kate Hudson as well, with Chris Robinson. Eric Stoltz was there. Basically anyone you could imagine. Like it was such a surreal piece. And some of the studios used to have like a VIP area that only the celebrities could get to. I think it was DreamWorks who released this one, and DreamWorks didn't believe in that. So everything was open. You're just hanging out with people. So walking in with Alec Baldwin was surreal. And like no one said, get out. It was Toronto. Like it's not LA, it's not New York. So they're so happy. Everyone loved their film. They were in a good mood. I don't think I left that party till like 3 a.m. and I don't know how I got home, because that was for sure the days before Uber and Lyft. But yeah, just a wonderful experience. And I've had a few movies where lucky enough to see it in Toronto during the film festival, and you just feel better about a movie there in that kind of audience with like 3,000 people rather than a 400-seat auditorium, with the talent there talking before the movie and going through. It's just a wonderful experience, and I definitely miss going to the movies. And hopefully that part of our life isn't going to be radically changed because of COVID. But that was a really fun piece, because watching a movie at home on a screen is okay, but you need that big audience. I'm a firm believer. So that was a fun experience.
In your notes, I couldn't tell it. Did you actually have a conversation with Cameron Crowe about the title of the film?
No, with him. It's funny. I had a conversation with now I'm blanking on his name, who did Friday Night Lights, Peter Berg.
Oh, Peter Berg, yeah.
So we were talking about a movie that he was going to do, and he was like, I always asked what I thought were interesting questions, like, how long is the movie going to be? And he looked at me like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you ask me that? Like, and I said, well, I'm thinking as a movie theater guy, and it's like a movie that's an hour and a half to an hour 45, we could play 5 times a night. If it's a 3-hour movie, then you can play twice. I was lucky enough to go see Avatar I had John Landau, who was the executive producer of Avatar.
This is when I asked you, I was like, you had a screening with someone pretty famous. This is the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
So it was actually, I can say now because I'm not working for them anymore. My wife was in LA with me at that time. And so my wife and I, who we said was an employee of the movie theater company, and somebody from Fox. And so it was three of us going to Lightstorm Studios to get this presentation on this movie that was a year and a half out at that point. And they're taking us through, and they spent like an hour and a half on like three nobodies, really, going through this great presentation. And it's like, wow, this is, hitting my wife going, this is so cool. I've seen a lot of cool movies. This was super cool. And they're going through the technology and this and this and this. So we're outside afterwards, and I turned to the Fox guy and I said, that guy who, we always had an expression for some of the studio people who did presentations. We called them faces, right? That face was amazing. He did a great presentation. Who was that? And they're like, oh, that was John Landau. The executive producer of the movie just did a presentation to me and my wife to talk about Avatar. That was surreal. But I remember calling people after that going like, I had film bookers that I'd worked with at our movie theater company that basically would say like, you got to keep an eye out for this one. This is the one's going to be huge. But so that, and we didn't see the movie. We just saw the technology behind it. And
right.
The funny thing now is that, Avatar 2 and 3 are going to come out. And I don't know if anyone's going to care.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just
like it's kind of, there's no,
too late. You we didn't capitalize on it.
It's been a while.
We worked on the merch for that one. It's like, it's not Star Wars. So there's not a good guy and a bad guy. There's kind of like levels of people. And it was so long ago. And that's when Katzenberg and everybody was talking about 3D, and nobody really likes 3D. And that was one of the big plays of it. So,
yeah, and then it's interesting to think of something from that standpoint, because I personally enjoy just any sort of pop culture material when the characters are more gray, whether it's a book or a movie. But from a merchandising standpoint, that's got to be harder to slang, right? Because it's, if everyone is good or bad, it's maybe a little harder.
Yeah. So the problem with that movie was it was so secretive. Like I've worked on, I think Shrek 3, whenever Shrek had the babies, like we couldn't show the babies to anybody. That had to be a big reveal, a big surprise. Avatar, we couldn't show them anything. And then the people were spending a lot of money to be rights holders or licensees on the movie. And they're like, we would have to go to them, basically getting them to sign something that was like with their own personal signature saying like, you're responsible. And if something happens, we could sue you for like $200 million. And it wouldn't be your company, it would be you personally. So
yeah.
Fun conversations to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the premiere party, were there any members of members of the cast that were overserved? Or, I'm imagining the Golden God scene, with, Billy Crudup. I mean, obviously they're probably not going to go that far, but anything notable or remarkable from it?
I don't think there was anybody from a cast perspective at that one. There's been other movies for sure. So you're talking about the bands, one of the things that we are always taught is if there's somebody you really like, don't meet them because it'll be a disappointment. The guy with the patch from the Avengers movies. I'm blanking on his name. He's in all the different movies. I'm not.
Which superhero?
And he's in the Marvel universe.
The Marvel universe?
The Soldier?
No, a famous guy, like famous actor. Hold on, I'm gonna look up.
Yeah.
But he was pretty, like there was some shenanigans going through in some of those VIP parties. So
I'm glad you brought up this idea, because it is something that I heard Cameron Crowe kind of talk about specifically. He was doing an interview about the movie, and he was talking about something that he had heard Spielberg say a long time ago, which is, when the people who you have up on your walls at 17, those are the people, if you ever meet those people, you revert back to a 17-year-old. You'll always be 17 if you meet that person. And he was bringing up this quote as something to kind of like really drive home this idea of what this was like for William, or what this was like for Cameron Crowe as a young boy, because he was 15, 16, 17 years old when he's interviewing these men. These are the people he had on his walls. So imagine being a 17-year-old and being exposed to those sort of people. I thought that was just kind of like it just, I mean, I don't know why it opened my eyes, but it was kind of like it helps you kind of realize the magnitude of these situations, these meetings. And then Patrick Fugit had mentioned, like, also, as a kind of like a side quip to that, about how, when you meet these people that you've idolized, a lot of times it's disappointing, where it is, you put them up on a pedestal.
It depends on the situation you're with. I was lucky enough, I got to meet Spielberg on set or on the lot. And when you meet directors who write, then they tend to be a little bit more, they're always thinking of what they're going to write next. So they're more talkative to you. When we've met the business type of, performer, they're not as fun. They're like, who are you? Why are you here? Get out.
Right.
Right. So like talent, I'll give you a great story. I was Leaving Las Vegas was one of the movies I was lucky enough to see at Toronto International Film Festival.
Nick Cage, huge fan.
Yeah. So Nick Cage and Elizabeth Shue. So it was in a smaller theater in Toronto, wasn't at the one that Almost Famous was in. It was probably at like a 600-seat auditorium. And standing there with one of the head people from MGM. I was running food service for the movie theater company at that point, and was kind of like the distributor relations guy. So Nick Cage walks in. I think it's Patricia Arquette he was married to at the time. And people are taking pictures and people are going crazy because it was in a small location so people could, see it. And then Elizabeth Shue, no one really noticed who she was. And she just walked in line to go get soft drinks and popcorn. And the studio person's like elbowing me going, get her out of that line. Like, what are we doing here? That's the star of our
she's
big
like
movie.
Wants to stand in line sometimes? Like, do you think sometimes
she did. So that was my kind of like, wasn't expecting to interact with her at that point. It's like, excuse me, Mrs. Shue, I need to get you out of the line. The studio's not very happy that you're standing in line. Whatever you want, I will get it for you. I'll bring it to your seat. It'll be fine. Then she looked at me, she goes, well, I'll let you do that, but what I need you to do is come sit with me then. Right? So I'm like, well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
At that age. It was kind of cool to go through and do it. And we actually became kind of friendly. I snuck her into a bunch of movies during the festival. We would bring her through the office to the back door. But if you remember Almost Famous, she's kind of nude half the movie. And you're sitting behind her, and it was kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, it was a little too, it's a little too much. So I would say that experience of watching a movie with talent in screening rooms is not, it sounds like it's like, wow, what a cool experience. I saw the movie Meet the Parents with Jay Roach, who was the director of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting next to him in a tiny screening room of like 14 people at Universal. Well, it sounds great. But like, if you're not laughing in the right places and not interacting with the film the way that they're expecting to see, then it can be problematic for you. Like, we used to know coming out of a screening, like, if you didn't like the movie, you got to get out. Like, you can't say anything. You can say you love it. You can never say anything bad because, they were listening to you, and it's like, it could be problematic, right? So that
it almost robs you of like the authentic experience of viewing it.
Yeah.
Cool versus authenticity.
Listen, I saw Jane Silent Bob reboot. I worked with Kevin Smith, so I was lucky enough to see that movie in his living room with one other person, with Kevin sitting in the kitchen listening to our reaction. Now, I love the movie, and I'd read the script before, and there wasn't any surprise, but like, it is a little nerve-wracking. Like, God, if I didn't like the movie, I wasn't reacting to it. Like, it's not the most easy piece. And again, when you don't have an audience to feed off of, that's what makes it problematic as well. So like,
yeah,
I think also like just on the authentic, like unlike the whole like meeting celebrities and having them not like be who you think that there are, like, I don't know why, maybe my brain is just different, but like what are people expecting? You know what I mean? Like, is it like that this person's going to be nice to you, or like, is it just like, I don't know. I've just always been in awe of people who still like are just like, I don't know, like sane after they get famous or semi-famous or almost famous, like, cause it's like, you just have all of these like, ups and downs of how people like view you. And then like, does that really put its mark on how you have the rest of your life if it's a fleeting moment in time or if it's continual. Like the shine obviously wears off a ton. So that's I'm just surprised you're alive. This is wonderful.
Well, but it's funny when you meet kind of the secondary talent. I find they're usually more problematic than the primary people because they're expecting you. Don't you know who I am? And I'm important. It's like, okay, it doesn't say anything. I have to be nice to you. So like, no, I'll be there. And we used to play games with some people, like when we're working on the film and we weren't that involved with it, the best thing is like, who are you again? And they would get them so pissed off. Like, so we wouldn't do that to everyone, but if people were a little bit more problematic, and the film festival stage is really kind of, it's a bunch of wannabe people who want to be in the movie theater business or in the movie business. So I remember somebody coming to me at the end. Now I was there for work. Like it wasn't for fun. I was there as a work environment. And somebody came up to me like 3/4 of the way through the festival. It's like, who are you? You must be famous because I've seen you at all these events. And I looked at them saying, well, if you saw me at all these events, then who are you? Because you have to be famous because you've been at all these things. I actually just work for the movie theater company. So it's my job to be here. But so it is an interesting business to be in. I think the one thing now, and I'm diverting a little bit, but like back in the day when we saw Almost Famous at the Toronto International Film Festival, if you didn't see it that night, you had to wait for release
months. Right?
Yeah, so like it was really an important thing. And now for the film festival, it's like it's all digital anyway. It's like, you know, whether it's on Apple or Amazon or whatever, like you'll be able to see it. But it was a really big thing to see a movie at that point because you knew you were going to see it. It was kind of that badge of honor. So it was a really cool thing to see. Almost as cool as getting the, which I never was, I'm not an Academy member, but like my friends who are Academy Award members who get those screenings.
Oh,
the screeners, right? So
yeah, those are nice. That would be a nice little perk.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is, and I, you know, I'm not trying to say that this is the same, but I think that like the kind of like attitude that you're describing within this industry, it persists everywhere because, you know, before we jumped on live, I was talking to Stuart about how, you know, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. Sometimes I go to these panels and I'll speak on small panels. Like I'm a very small fish in probably a medium-sized pond, right? And some of my friends are larger fish in that pond. And I was attending a party, kind of like similar to what you're saying. And I'm looking around. We're about to hop on an elevator. We're going up to where the party is, and you know, it's kind of like a who's who of YouTube content creators for this specific genre, right? And then me, right? Me, and then my gorgeous wife. So the fact that I was with this gorgeous woman probably helps me fit in a little bit, right? Because I'm like, oh, like who's this guy? And I'm not going to name a name, but there was a very well-known content creator who comes up and introduces himself and says, gosh, I don't want to make this sound meaner than it actually was, but it was, and why should I know who you are?
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was just like one of those things where I was
like the passive aggressive, like, and
I was so taken aback. I'm like, you have no reason to know who I am, sir. You know, because I was like, I know who this guy is. I've watched, you know, thousands of his videos. Like, I'm like a fan of his. And he's just like, oh my God, nope, no, never mind. You know, I'll just get on the next elevator, sir. But yeah, no, we
used to always tell people we were executive producers, like not on the talent side, but on the business side that would always give them kind of pause to think about it because we were the ones financing the movies, which was completely not true. But there's a way to kind of screw with people in that way. By the way, the person I was talking about at the film festival who was doing stuff, we were surprised with Samuel L. Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Well, and you say surprise. When you say doing stuff, are we talking about illicit substances?
No.
No, just acting lewdly?
We couldn't get into a room. He was busy.
Oh, gotcha.
Good for him.
Yeah. I don't think his wife was very appreciative, but so like there was some stuff back in the day. But that was, you know, kind of out of town. Toronto was a different country, so I think it was treated that way sometimes. But he was a super nice guy. I don't know the whole story, but it was kind of interesting. And I don't know him, and I don't work with him, so I'm good. Yep.
No kink shaming here on TMC.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. We're going to have one more question. Before I ask the question, I'm going to throw this. If there's anyone in the chat that has questions for us, you can go ahead and let those roll now. Well, I'll get to these right after we address this. And I can't believe I didn't ask this question. It's the first question I have. Stuart, what is it you love about music?
What do I love about music?
Yeah, this is the famous last question of the movie when William is interviewing Russell. Russell, what is it you love about music?
I just like where it takes me to, like closing my eyes and being able to kind of get out of my head. And there are some songs that have special meaning for strange reasons. I like this thing behind me from the Cameron Crowe. I was in Spain on vacation, and they have a popular song, to me anyway. It's called "Holiday in Spain."
Yes,
and like,
it's my favorite Cameron Crowe song.
good.
Yeah,
I was on the beach in Barcelona, and like it's the first song I'm playing. I don't really care. That was the lullaby that I wanted to hear. So I think it kind of takes you to different places, and I love all different kinds of music. So any movies that have some relevance or a great soundtrack are obviously gonna play more for me. So.
Well, in addition to like taking you away, right, it can take you back to like a certain point in your life too, you know, and I think that that's really cool. And like, I just have always liked how music made me feel, you know what I mean? And that was one thing also, like, obviously cannabis user. But like, that's one thing that I liked about that too, is like, that was always really grounding for me, no matter what experience I was having. So.
Yeah, no, I mentioned that ending scene, right, where William asks them. Just a really quick, and this speaks to the rewatchability of this film. Billy Crudup starts the answer to begin with everything, right? And that sounds like a good enough answer, but To Begin With is the first album of Stillwater. So so if you watch it, he says to begin with, and then William laughs. He kind of gives like a little laugh, and then he says everything, and then it kind of fades off. So that was a cool little like piece that I thought, because there, like I said, there's a lot that you can dig into with Cameron Crowe talking about this film. We alluded to the film went through like 4 different titles. Stuart, I know you had some notes on that. Not only that, but it was just one of those things where I think the titles kind of evolved along with the idea of the movie, because he talked about how, and this is weird, Austin Powers kind of shifted the direction of this film, because I think at one point he wanted David Bowie to play a very like formative role, but then Austin Powers comes out. They have this English kind of like it's hard to take it, it's nonsensical, and he wanted it to be more American, and then he wanted the journalist to play a bigger role. So I thought that was a kind of an interesting thing, or an interesting take. Go ahead.
And there's another 30 minutes of the movie, because the untitled version, which is the director's cut, which I haven't seen yet.
Yeah. Not only you, but Billy Crudup hasn't seen it. In the 20th anniversary, all the other members of the cast are talking about it, and Billy Crudup was, so again, go to YouTube. There's a 20th anniversary with Russell Crowe and all the actors, and Billy Crudup's talking about how he has a teenage son and he wants to watch it with his son, because at the time that they filmed it, it was during quarantine, and it was like one of these things. Hey, we're going to do this. Me and my son we've been watching movies during quarantine, and we're going to do Almost Famous soon. And they're like, well, watch this version. He said, what do you, I don't even know this version exists. And so it's kind of a really funny, heartwarming moment when Billy Crudup learns that there's this untitled version.
But it's funny though, because when people say, well, it's on DVD, it's like, it may as well be on Laserdisc, because I haven't had a DVD in my house in 10 years, right? So everything's digital. And when I bought the movie on iTunes years ago, and normally those other cuts are with it, but this one isn't. You can buy it on, I think Amazon Prime has it where you can rent it. So when I was looking today, it's like, oh, I need to watch it. And I don't know, for me, it's always been one of those perfect memory movies. So I don't know if I need any more. Right.
Yeah.
So like,
you're good. You're good.
2 hours. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So our final question, unless we get any other chats, questions, is, William famously gets to go on tour with Stillwater. What is the band that you would want to go on tour with? And I'm seeing the imagery behind Stuart there, so I have a feeling I know where he's going with this. Stuart, You want to take us away?
I'm gonna change it because you know what? As
you-
we were going through it, yeah, it is the Cameron Crowe's behind me. But if I looked on that wall, I have when I was 17, I worked as a hot dog vendor outside of a prominent hotel in Toronto, and it was the day after the Born in the USA tour. It was in day one, and I was wearing my Springsteen shirt. And this lady came up to me and said, "Do you want to meet him?" It's like, yeah, I want to meet him. No way you're going to introduce me to him. She goes, "Yeah, meet me at the hotel at 5:45 and I'll introduce you." And sure enough, I get to the hotel at 5:40. Springsteen's coming out with most of the band except for Clarence. And it was like, yeah, I think that would be a more fun, big experience of being on tour with Bruce Springsteen, the Street Band, probably in the 80s. Not today, but that would be a cool experience.
I almost made the question limited where it's like you have to pick a band currently touring, but then it's like no one's currently touring. And then it was like, well, then do the band members just have to be alive, So, but
it's coming next year. Everyone's going to be touring in 21.
It's going to be fucking.
I've already got tickets to a concert, you guys.
Me too. I bought tickets to a concert in Asheville, North Carolina for August 27th. One of my favorite bands. Yeah, I'm excited.
Mine's September 3rd. Dave Matthews Band at the Gorge.
Is that what? Well, hold on. So I don't mean to make plans publicly while we're on a live stream, but is that what the one Mike maybe said he might have an extra ticket to? Okay, cool. I'm just making sure. I need to talk to Lita about getting those dates. Very cool. So who's yours, Kait?
I mean, I hate to say it, but I would choose Dave Matthews, which is so cringy. I just couldn't typecast myself more. However, my reason behind it is because I can play the violin. So I feel like I would actually be able to jam with them if it really came down to it.
Oh, you can do a little
me and Boyd. Yeah. That was when I knew I was cool, right? I had to do violin as a kid. That's torture. And then I found Dave Matthews Band and I was like, oh, cool. That guy does it. I was like, his are way cooler than mine. You
know what though? That's a smart. You mentioned your dad was a musician, right? He's in a band. Shout out to
Guitars for Vets. Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Shout out to Guitars for Vets. I was just gonna say that. Because I've always heard I clearly don't play the violin, but I've always heard the violin is the hardest. So I think that was one of those things. And it's if you can play the violin, you can play anything.
Yep.
That's one of
stand
those.
Stand up bass. I can. Yeah.
Probably if you can read the music, you probably sit down and plunk down some keys on the piano. Yeah. So yeah, it's a total musician dad move making you play the violin. So for me, I mean, I don't know, it's really easy for me to just go to either Nirvana or Tupac, just because you can't see those anymore, right? I can't go and tour with those guys anymore.
Yeah.
David Bowie would be another one that would be really high on there, who's very, in kind of close to the making of this film. His music's involved. He was almost picked for a role in the movie. I really want to. This is my question, and I was going back and forth on it, and I knew I was like, God damn it, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to be the one that struggles with it. One of my favorite bands is Arcade Fire. I just don't think they'd be very cool to tour with. I just think that they probably be pretty boring. I don't
think a lot of people are very cool to tour with anymore. I think they get the privacy that maybe people didn't have in the past. I don't know.
For sure. I'm going to go with actually, and this is actually, I forgot who I wanted to go with. I want to go with the band of the shirt I'm wearing right now, the Beths. This is a small little band out of Australia, perhaps New Zealand, in that area, New Zealand, Australia. They are some really good suggestions down below. We're going to get to in a second, but yeah, the Beths, shout out. I want to make sure that people who aren't familiar, maybe go check them out. They seem like they'd be a fun band to party with. We have some suggestions from the chat. We have Dancing Sean saying the Beatles. Who wouldn't want to go? That's just
totally.
A cultural phenomenon. It's like a tidal wave just washing over everyone. And then he also says Snoop Dogg. Yeah, Snoop Dogg.
Only if Martha's coming.
Martha and Snoop Dogg.
I want to join their friendship triangle.
Yeah, you're definitely going to. I feel like this is probably worth mentioning now. we've both talked, Stuart and I have both talked about the Golden God scene. I don't know that we had mentioned that was based off of a real life occurrence. Stuart, do you want to talk a little bit about that with Led Zeppelin?
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the notes on that one.
Yeah.
But
because it was something that actually happened, at a famous hotel. Was it the
Roosevelt?
No, it's not the Roosevelt, but
no, it was the Continental Hyatt House, the Riot House.
The Riot House. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Russell climbs the roof and yelling, I am a golden god is inspired by Led Zeppelin frontman Robert Plant yelling that from the balcony of the Riot House, the Continental Hyatt House from the movie, right? So
yeah. So, I mean, again, a lot of what you're seeing in this movie is based on stuff that really happened out there, or there's a historical basis. And if there's a reason to rewatch this movie, it's more so to just dig into those sort of things, the historical basis of this film. Go back, rewatch it. I think there's a lot to be appreciated. There's also a lot to maybe question and talk about, which is why it's a great movie for a podcast like this. Stuart, do you have anything you want to plug before we let you go?
No, I'm good. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for coming, Stuart.
Oh,
I got
pleasure.
to watch a movie with Stuart, and it was really great. It was Jay and Silent Bob reboot. So I know how awesome it is to watch movies with Stuart.
That's right. And you've had Kevin Smith on the Pop Moms podcast, so if you are not familiar with,
and maybe that was one of my more recent meeting of celebrities where I was like, no, I just smoked weed with Kevin Smith. So I'll cross that off my bucket list.
Yeah.
In front of an office building, which is
in front of a place I used to work at Amazon. Suck it, Bezos. Pop Moms podcast. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Amazon Podcasts, really anywhere you stream. We're starting to do more video. We have a new video coming out on Thursday, and we actually have a crossover coming up with Reefer Madness.
That's right, we do. I have that. That's on me. This episode was a very fun one to do. I want to dedicate this episode to Eileen Leo, my wife's grandmother, who just passed away recently. A very special lady who welcomed me into their family with open arms. Also, just there's been a lot going on, so we will get that Reefer Madness crossover out. It's coming soon. Also, Eat God See Acid coming soon. We're going to also have as we mentioned at the top of the show, our new poll for tomorrow. And I like to give the people who are tuning into these live streams. I know it's not early if you're on the west, or if you're on the West Coast, it's not too bad.
It's okay.
Right?
It's still almost
8:30. If you're on the East Coast, it's 11:30. We're approaching midnight. So our guest for our next movie, comedian and podcast host Hennessy Williams. This guy is he's a real treat. He's got 4 very interesting movies. I was surprised by his picks. He will be featured, and his movies will be able to be voted on tomorrow. That is May 4th. Stuart,
May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you. That's right. Thank you guys for joining us. Those in the chat and those who watched and listened, thank you for joining us. This is the TMC podcast. Don't forget, subscribe if you are feeling so kind. Like this video, smash that like button, and please join the Facebook group, the TMC podcast and TKOK podcast network. We're posting a lot of content there. It's a great community to be a part of. Again, guys, thank you. We love you.
Thank you.
For those who don't have an hour and a half, we will be doing a highlight video. So those listening to that highlight video, prop calls will be taking us away right now. And everyone else, good night. Take care. Penny Jane.
So witty.